A very good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to Make More Content, Turn Your Brand into a Content Powerhouse, a bizibl webinar in association with Censhare. My name's James Lawson, and I'm your moderator this afternoon. I'm a consultant editor at bizibl, and I've been writing and consulting in data-driven marketing and customer management for over 20 years. Today, we're looking forward to some great content as we're joined by Phil Arnold, who's the Managing Director of Censhare in the UK, and James Naylor, Group Publishing Systems Manager for Slimming World, both of whom are ideally placed to give us some insights into how you can reposition your organisation to achieve more with less and meet the content expectations of today's consumers. In James's case, he'll be sharing how Slimming World has done just that. Before we start, we're all working remotely, of course, so we'd just like to acknowledge that there's a slightly higher than usual chance of technical difficulties. Although we're not anticipating any problems, if we or any of you run into issues, please be aware that we are recording the webinar, so you'll be sent a copy to watch on demand or share with colleagues shortly afterwards. Next, let me tell you about how you can interact with us today. You're in listen-only mode, but we're always keen to hear any questions or comments that you have throughout the session. Please use the questions pane to submit these to us at any time. We're also monitoring a Twitter hashtag, which is marketing content, so feel free to interact with us on Twitter as well. And so with that, we'll get started, and I'll bring in Phil and James. Hello, guys.
Hi, James.
Hey, Phil, I think you're going to kick us off, is that right?
Yes, I am.
Right.
Thank you. Welcome from me as well. As James said, I'm Phil Arnold. I'm UK MD of Censhare, and we're a software vendor for a content platform, very powerful and flexible content platform, which you can learn a little bit about today. But it's more about what Slimming Worlds are doing. But before I hand over to James, I just want to spend a few minutes introducing a few ideas, things for you to think about during the presentation and afterwards. So these are the sort of things, whenever you're working on a new project, whether it's technology-led or business process-led, the sorts of things that really need to be considered. And there's sort of 4 topics that I want to introduce. The first one is to make sure you analyze your business. And this is making sure that you gather all the information. What are all your users doing at the moment? What are their pain points? If you could solve that one nagging problem, or at least alleviate it a little bit for some of your users, could you make their day-to-day work so much better? But when you're auditing and analyzing your business, also keep an eye to the future. Where are you planning on taking your business? Where do you see the technology landscape changing, to make sure that you're not ending up down a dead end that doesn't give you flexibility for the future? And as part of talking to all your key stakeholders, find some key champions in each department who can lead the change on the ground. So both from a process, people and technology point of view, you want to bring those people along with you for what is usually the hardest part of any project. The technology, the workflows, the process, that's all generally quite easy, but bringing the whole teams together can often be a bit more of a challenge. What are their current workflows? Are they working with file systems, shared folders, Excel documents, keeping everything in Excel? Or do you have some systems in place which are already helping to manage some part of the process? And how do you tie them all together? And the second topic I want to look at is ultimately why we're doing all these things. We want to deliver the best customer experiences so that your customers are seeing all the right information, the right images, the right video, the right content, with the correct rights management information, product data if it's relevant, push to them where they want it, when they want it, in the correct language, with timely, accurate information on the appropriate channels. So in order to make all this happen, the third item I want to look at is how does a content platform fit into your wider technology stack? What is your tech stack at the moment? Are you looking for a platform that can just manage the content? Are you looking for something that will handle all digital assets, websites, print production, catalogs, brochures, that kind of thing? And how does that fit in and integrate with your web CMS, your web shops, physical shops, your CRM, your product data? All that information, how does it tie together? And it's looking at it from the point of view of both the initial project technical implementation, but also the ongoing maintenance of those integrations. That this is often the key part that needs to be looked at with any technology you're looking at. How open and flexible are the integration options, both for that initial implementation, but more importantly, as each of those systems gets updates over the coming months and years, how easy is it to maintain those and keep everything connected and ticking along to deliver those customer experiences? And the fourth item is to look at the objectives. What are you trying to achieve? What's the ultimate goal? Is it increasing the quality and volume of your content creation, effectively doing more with the same number of people? Is it also about brand governance, consistency of data, and legal compliance, especially in these days of GDPR? Is it about exploring new business opportunities, licensing and syndicating of content, or expanding into new markets and new output channels via automated transformations into different file formats, or semi-automated localization to get content into new languages to help expand into new markets? There's also the option to remove or at least reduce organizational silos, especially over the last year or so where we've all been working remotely. It's integrating your team wherever they might be around the world, but also the potential to integrate any third-party agencies or similar that you're working with as well. Get them all working in a consistent, controlled, well-managed way. And they're just a few of the ideas I wanted to introduce to get you to think about. And before I hand over to James for his part of the presentation, we have a short poll for everyone to interact with us.
That's right, that's great. I'll just jump in here. Thanks, Phil. We're just going to have a quick poll, early poll here. And in this poll, we're trying to understand what your barriers to creating more content are. What are the challenges for your content operation? That is the question. So if you could select one or more of the following answers: managing complex workflows, file servers, Dropbox, Google Drive, and all the others, all the other options. Finding time for ideas and creativity, a lack of systems integration, legacy technology. So while our audience are filling out the poll, there's something for everyone there, I think. But do either of you want to jump in with a prediction as to what might be the greatest challenges, what you see in your own customers? Maybe Phil.
That's a tough one. I think all of them come up at some point or the other. But yeah, a lot of it is down to what we see a lot of. It's being able to find stuff that you did a photo shoot for a particular item some time ago, but where is the latest information? Who owns the rights to it? If these things aren't managed right at the start of the process, it becomes virtually impossible to figure it out later on. But no, I'm very interested to see what poll results we get.
I think we've all been there trying to find something that we know we did a year ago, but we're not quite sure where it is or what format it's in and so on. But here we go, here are the answers. So again, the question was, what are the challenges for your content operation? And we've got the first one appears to be the highest, is managing complex workflows, 65%. Then we have only 6% with these file servers, Dropbox, Google Drives, storage, transfer, media. More than half, 53%, struggle with finding time for ideas and creativity. 29% have a lack of systems integration. 18% struggle with legacy technology. So yeah, most of those are definitely up there as challenges with managing complex workflows. Top of the list. So I think that's perfect for us today, isn't it? Really. So that's great. Well, I think here we're going to hand over to James from Slimming Worlds, James Naylor, and over to you, James.
Thanks, James, and thank you for that introduction as well, Phil. And the poll was really interesting because I think it covers exactly what I thought, which is the major two things that we're looking to do at Slimming World are manage complex workflows and find time. So turning your brand into a content powerhouse is a laudable goal. But for me at Slimming World, our simple goal was just to make enough time to have a cup of tea during the working day and to be able to go home on time. So we're going to talk about some of the projects that we've done at Slimming World to make that happen. But just for a quick introduction, for those that aren't aware, Slimming World is a 50-year-old company. We're a membership organisation with, we did have over 1 million members pre-COVID. Everything changed last year. But we are a weight loss support organisation with a head office in Derbyshire, creating lots of content across many different teams, whether that's recipe books, magazines, marketing material. And we have many different teams kind of interacting across that. We create content for consultants, for group members, for online members, for lapsed members, for newspapers, the whole kind of range of customer experiences. And one of the key challenges is that we started very small in a small office in Derbyshire, say in 1969, and we've now grown rapidly, and certainly kind of over the last 10 years, that kind of the output channels, the ways that we need to reach our members and consultants and prospective members and consultants has changed dramatically over time and continues to change, and we need to manage that. And so 4 years ago, I joined Slimming World, and my role as Group Publishing Systems Manager was firstly to look at that challenge that we talked about just a minute ago, which was finding content that you know you created, content that you know you can use again, content that you know you don't want to have to commission and buy again. So we started initially, as many of these content projects do, with an image library, so a digital asset management system to manage a library of images with all of the metadata and the keywording and the organization to make it easy for internal teams to find and reuse that content. However, we always had the intention that DAM is not a project, DAM is a program of projects. And so from the image library, we've taken kind of steps along the Slimming World content systems journey. So we started by enhancing the content archive with additional organizational tiers, historical content that previously just sat on shelves, and mining that content to make it easier to find what you're looking for. We then managed to bring in the print workflow into the system. This was really important because it manages the whole process of content creation. And rather than seeing DAM as the end point of a process where you're loading content into an image library, it becomes the start point by doing it directly in the DAM, and the DAM then gets fed by the print workflow. After that, we started to look at automation and archive enhancement, so breaking our recipe books and magazines down into more digestible content chunks, so like individual recipes, individual features, as well as the images and the magazine pages themselves. And then recently we've kind of added in scheduling and enhanced print management so that we can more easily manage campaigns and pages and magazine and book schedules, so that everything is started from the DAM, goes into the print workflow, and then feeds the asset library. All of these things are, again, they're part of a program of projects, but they're not one big project, because one big project like that would be almost impossible to get signed off. So with these things worked through, our next challenge was to look at the content systems model. And I'm sure that many of you listening will be able to share similar slides, because, as I was saying earlier, the world of content creation management is complex. We've got overlapping teams, overlapping content, multiple systems. So, for example, in this very simplified diagram of some of the Slimming World content teams, the marketing and PR team might need something from the magazine team, but that needs to be then worked on by the design, and then 2 months later, that content is then repurposed for a piece of evergreen online content. All of those teams are overlapping with the same content. And then a further example is that the magazine team needs to create a feature that's based on a marketing campaign, which is in the planning stages. So there's no actual content available, but we know it's coming. So being aware of the process of it being created, reviewed, approved, and tracked without anything actually being ready is also really important. So these teams interact regularly on a daily basis around pieces of content. And then if you overlap that onto the systems that teams are using, those systems previously were disparate and not connected. So before DAM, before our system went in place, the blue bubble in the middle wasn't there. So the other systems, the web CMSs, the print production process, the mobile apps, PIM systems, and CRM systems were not linked together. So there's copying and pasting between systems, or even worse, retyping text into different systems, sharing text by email and Word documents, having to copy and paste it out and reformat text and adjust images. I'm sure that these are things that are common to you in your working processes. And similarly, communication is done by whatever process the person starting the communication wants to use. So leading to overlapping conversations about overlapping content, being created by overlapping teams and overlapping systems. And then last year happened, and you add on Teams and Slack and all of the other ways that we talk and Zoom and things like that. So the overlaps overlap themselves, and then they become this model. And you can see from a distance how these systems have evolved and how the processes have happened, and you can justify how the model is created. But I hope you can also see that it's really clear that resolving this will free up times for your teams to do what they do best, which is to create great content. So the aim is to go from something like this process with systems and teams and processes overlapping to what I described as the content engine. I'm never one to shy from a structural diagram, so I propose the following, where we have one system which holds the content, and all teams use that system to create, store, and share that content. And the next step on top of that is that they use that core asset store and the workflow system then integrated into your outward facing platforms. So we hook in the various web CMSs or the print production process into the content engine, so that there's only one place where people are storing that content. And then where possible, we feed the feeder processes that go to generating that content are also brought into the same system. So commissioning, briefing, and tracking. And the aim of this is that there's only one place to go if you're doing anything related to content. If you're creating content, you know where to store it. If you're looking for content, you know where to find it. And if you do a time and motion study across the teams in your organizations, it becomes clear very quickly that finding content, although it's only a matter of minutes per person per day, adds up significantly when you multiply it over the people and the systems and the pieces of content that you're working on. However, a content engine like this, with multiple processes, multiple types of content, multiple links to other systems, becomes a change project. And we know from experience, change projects are scary. They're scary for the people involved in the change project. They're scary for people signing off within the organization around a change like this. So following the footsteps of other successful change programs, my approach to what we're doing at Slimming World is to break this challenge and project down into discrete and more easily digestible chunks. And importantly, although each of these chunks are separate, they contribute towards the end game, which for the end user is simplification. So as I said earlier, one of the key things is to bring all of these processes into one place, because it simplifies the decision-making process that your content creators, reviewers, approvers have to do. They know where the content is, they know what to do with it, and they know where it's going to go. So what I'm going to talk about today is a couple of the steps that we've taken towards this content platform. And the first thing that we did was a proof of concept. And to do that, we had to identify a process or a product within the business that's self-contained, but contains a microcosm of the factors that we were looking to approve. So for example, the product that we picked was worked on by multiple teams. The product that we picked was used in multiple places, but it was a fairly small and discrete one-off product. In this case, it was effectively a marketing brochure. So the first thing that we did was to work across the teams that were involved in this project to identify the pinch points that have evolved over time when working on this particular product. And the main goal that we looked at was to reduce the inefficiencies between the content teams that were creating the content for the brochure and the design teams who were actually creating the product itself. So we looked at what we could do to remove the requirement for using Word for content editing, remove the copy-paste cycle of content transposition between Word documents and InDesign documents. We wanted to fix the way that we were tracking changes, which was based around emails and taps on the shoulders, or in the before times, hovering over a desk and saying, can you just change this? Can you just change that? And having to kind of then track that into an Excel sheet, which was then monitored and changed and wasn't shareable between different people. And most importantly for me is that for this proof of concept, it was selling in the concept. The concept is the wrong word, but selling in the fact that what we should be doing as an organization across the teams is that the right team should be doing the right job at the right time. And this sounds very kind of trite and simplified, but looking at the way that the process had evolved over time, changes were being sent to a design team. So a design team whose skills were in layout, image work, and creating these beautiful products, but they were being handed kind of text changes and having to read and understand and identify what other people were sending over for changes and things like that. And it's not the greatest use of their time, and it's not the greatest use of the teams that were creating that content. So with that in mind, small project, self-contained, small number of teams involved, we made our first steps into eliminating those pinch points. And our main, our kind of main first step was to move the authoring process into the content platform, or the CMS. And by doing this, we reached the goal of having one place to store the content. So whether that was the content that was on the pages, or the pages themselves, or the PDFs or the images that were involved in that product, everything was in the same place, and all of the teams looked in the same place to see the content. It was a single source of truth for the content. By moving the authoring into the CMS, we also made or empowered the authors to own the versioning and the change control of the content itself. So if you wrote an article and you wanted to make changes to the article, you could make those changes to the article directly. You weren't changing the layout, you weren't changing the design, but you were changing the part of the process that you owned. So you own the process, you own the technology. But by moving the process into the content engine and using standards-based content, what we were able to do was to link those content articles onto the layout using templates and InDesign. So the design teams had full control over their part of the process, which was making the product look how they wanted it to look. And by linking those two things together, the content authors were able to make changes that were reflected on the layouts without having to involve the design team. So those changes are reflected much more automatically, all the while the content owners own the control of the process. And it worked, which is always a good thing. Content authors were happier with the control. Designers were happier not to be interpreting the comments on the Word doc or scribbles on a printout. And from my point of view, owning the content platform and the publishing systems, this process adds depth to the dam by having more content available to more people more quickly. So a very small proof of concept, which led then into the main event. The proof of concept itself finished in mid to late 2019. And then, as you're all aware, 2020 happened and the world changed. But with it came some opportunities. The proof of concept that we had completed proved that we could collaborate in one system. And in our case, we have our system hosted in a SaaS platform, which is able to be accessed from anywhere. So we took advantage of that and moved on to the much larger project, or moved on to a much larger project. It was probably a bit too large, to be honest. But we went from a product which was 24 pages with one article per page, with a print-only layout and relatively free-form layouts, to one of our kind of core content products that we use across at Slemming World, which is effectively a manual of operation. This was a 600-page manual with multiple article chunks, simultaneous web and print output, with much more templated layouts, but automatic web styling. So what we've added in on top of the proof of concept is this concept of content first, dual publishing to print and web at the same time. And we went from an existing process, which was looking at an Excel sheet like this, very similar tracking process with multiple content entry points across multiple teams. But the dramatic difference in this particular project is that the web element meant that we had two very distinct teams doing the same work twice effectively, extra processes and more time. So this project helps all of those teams involved. It speeds up the time to live, and it helps to minimize mistakes in the translation from print to web, because we're not putting things on a print layout, then having to deconstruct that print layout to then put it into a website, which is increasingly important. Time to live doesn't lend itself to a print first process, just because of that concept of breaking down and then re-importing. The existing process was also very manual, tracking content in Excel, copying and pasting content between documents, reformatting images, along with the communication and revision processes layered on top of that. But in time-honored tradition, before I go on to what we achieved, I think we have another quick poll, James.
Yes, that's right. That's right. We're just going to the very quick poll now. So does this sound familiar? let's see what, if any, systems you're using to track your content workflow. So that's the question. What systems are you using to track your content workflow? And select one or more of the following: spreadsheets or other documents, and we're including things like Word documents in there as well, dedicated web tools, corporate workflow system, or none of the above. So if you could just fill in one or more of those answers, and that would be great. So in the meantime, we'll give you a minute to answer that. I just take a quick opportunity to remind everyone that you're free to ask any questions you've got using the questions panel at any time. We'll be getting to those during the Q&A session at the end. But in the meantime, I take it, guys, that you're expecting a reasonable number of people to vote for spreadsheets, the sort of jack of all trades of the digital world.
That's my experience so far, James. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always amazing how spreadsheets can be manipulated and used for virtually anything. It's not necessarily the best way, but generally, up to a point, it works. And we've seen some incredibly complex examples over the years.
Yes, some absolutely enormous spreadsheets. I've seen a few of those myself, where you really want a database, not a spreadsheet. But okay, we've got the answers in. That's great. And again, the question was, what systems are you using to track your content workflow? And the leader is, yep, spreadsheets. And then we have at 47% for spreadsheets. And then we have dedicated web tools, 40%, a corporate workflow system, 33%, none of the above, 33%, a third are not using any of those to track their content workflow. So interesting. Yeah, a good spread there. So James, if I could just hand back to you now, I think.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, James. Hopefully this is working as well. As I talked about before, we went from this very kind of manual process, manual systems for tracking, not managed in a comprehensive fashion, to this flow, which for me, a workflow diagram is a thing of beauty. And this new flow was focused around the article itself rather than the page of the manual that it was being worked on. So in our case, content first. The article is always the canonical source. There's always only one version. The content writers own that one version. All of those articles are held within the content engine, the DAM, and they're controlled by a workflow, which combined with assignments to different people, they control who's working on what and make it really simple for, say, for example, an approver to know that they have a document assigned to them to approve. Or if an article needs to be changed, it can have its workflow status changed. So very quickly, we were able to make dashboards for the various stakeholders of this project to show them what needs to be worked on and by whom. So you get a really quick, at a glance view of the entire process around this particular product. And really importantly, the communication around those articles is also done in the DAM within the content engine, and it keeps everything within one place. And then by switching to this standards-based content-first process, we are able to take those articles, place them onto layouts using the same processes that we did in the proof of concept, and then also build in this link using some standard API calls that are built into our platform to create a web front end to this content, so that the content owners are now driving the web version of this particular product directly. There's no translation, there's no communication, there is no requirement for doing any content transformation between systems. They make a change, they make it live. It gets flagged to the print team to be done at some point, but we get the same content in the same format across print and web simultaneously. The content is visible to everybody that needs to know, that needs to do something with it, and editing rights can be granted as required or restricted if it's a read-only thing. And as the output on web is controlled by standard style sheets, and the content on InDesign is created by paragraph styles and templates, it means that changes can be flowed automatically when necessary. So as part of this process of building the product or rebuilding the product within our content engine, we were able to make tweaks and changes to the content or the template, press a button, and see all of those changes flow into the relevant products automatically, which is a significant game changer when working with teams who have been working across systems and across different interfaces into that content. And it also means for the consumers of this content, the ultimate end users, the readers, our consultants, they get changes on the web immediately, whereas before the web would have to wait for the print version to be created, printed, sent out to them, and then subsequently deconstructed and then made into a web page. We now go kind of content first, which means web is always up to date, but it's always the same content. So any changes made are automatically flowed in without having to track changes across web, Word, and InDesign, and all of the reviewing and the checking processes that are involved around that. So now we're truly consistent. And going back to the kind of the title of this presentation, it's about making more time. So by doing this, we've effectively freed up one whole team of having to do work required to build a website. We've also removed a whole tranche of checking and reviewing and approval processes for 2 platforms, because you make the changes once in your content and then the 2 receiving platforms are updated automatically. And one of the things that we need to do to realize those benefits is that we have to operationalize this knowledge. Operationalize is a horrible word, but I use it anyway. And this project would be a failure if it required a technical person to always be involved, someone like myself to kind of help manage the translations and build the InDesign documents or build the CSS. So what we've worked really hard to do is to put the ownership of the relevant parts in the same way that we've done for content creation, is putting the responsibilities in the right place with the right teams. So we start with the content teams. They have ownership of the content creation and the flow. We've built workflows and approval processes into the DAM, so it's all in the same place. I've put here design last, because one of the things that we learned very quickly is that designers are very good at making things look beautiful and readable. But what we needed to do is to kind of standardize lots of things. So we kind of went to a design last process where they were designing based on the structure of the article itself. So headlines, subheadlines, bullets, all of those kind of things that make up an article. And then once we've got those teams involved, the web, the design, the content teams, and I'd done my evangelizing, it was really important to step back as quickly as possible and let those teams learn the process and really kind of embrace the tools and the technology. Because I think it was Phil was talking about earlier, was about championing the process is not something that can be done from outside of the teams. The teams themselves have to want to own this change, to embed it truly into their working processes. Then we document, and then share that documentation and the knowledge around the process. And then the final part about evangelizing that is that identifying the next project involves sharing the benefits of what we've done to the wider organization. So I work very closely with 2 or 3 people on this particular project, but it has an impact or potential impact across many more people, many more teams within the business. And what's really important is that they need to be aware that those things are happening. So it becomes very much a selling job from my point of view to help them to realize those the benefits of what we're doing. And so just to kind of recap on what we've done, we were looking at projects to help give our content creation teams the power and the time to create more content, turning them into this content powerhouse. We wanted to do that by eliminating the busy work that's involved in content creation and distribution, and giving the teams that time back to do what they're good at, which is making the content. So the benefits now is that the process is now content driven. It's not systems driven. It's about the products and the content and the teams using it, making the system do what they want it to do. We've eliminated or dramatically reduced the duplication of effort and the duplication of content across systems, and the right teams are doing the right jobs at the right time. And really specifically for us in this particular project at Slimming World, we've effectively eliminated 50% of the work required by removing the requirement to maintain a separate web CMS of this content. It hasn't been without its challenges. Development of the process and the system takes time, and I think that budgeting in time to do that thorough analysis of the content, making sure that it's standardized and that the people working with that content are able to make the most of the systems that you're building is a really important early part of that process. We're still working out through the edge cases. Some of the templating of what was a free-form document hasn't been easy. So a really simple example is that in this 600-page document, there is one kind of alphabetized list that they do in reverse alphabetical format. And you think, oh, this is a really small kind of niggly problem. But it's those kind of things that will come up as you go. And my approach with these things has always been to kind of start, build, iterate quickly, because that way you help to build in the you build in the knowledge and you empower the teams to both identify and then fix themselves. But by going back to the first principles and letting the content drive the output and reinforcing that principle with every conversation has been really key. Simply because having the content drive the output means that each team knows what they need to do with that content. And finally, the kind of ultimate measure of success is that the project has gone live and I haven't been fired. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a big tick. So that's it from me in terms of what we're doing in terms of realising the benefits. I think we're going to hand over to questions, James.
That's right. Yep. Okay. Well, thanks very much for that, James. That was fantastic. You know, it's such a great, like, one of the most detailed case studies I've seen in a long time. Very insightful, incredibly useful, loads to think about. So yeah, let's take some time to answer some of the questions we've had in from the audience, and we can see what people are thinking about how this applies to their own content challenges. We've got a couple of questions here that you've kind of answered. I mean, I'll just go through them quickly. But someone's asking you, what drove the change? You know, what caused you to, at Slimming World to commence the transformation project? You've talked about all the different systems and the overlapping responsibilities and so forth. Was there any one or two things in particular that really triggered the move to a super capable system like Censhare to kind of tie it all together?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and one that I kind of grapple with, because my history with Phil and Censhare is over a number of years. So when I went to Slimming World and we put Censhare in, I was aware of what the system was capable of, and the business was not necessarily that aware. So it's about finding people who you can kind of work with across those teams to say, we have a new system that can do X, Y, or Z, and then talking about their pain points and their pinch points, and seeing whether the system that you've got or another system that you might be able to work with is appropriate to fix those things. In this case, because I knew that we had invested in a system which had DAM, but also workflow, CMS, and API capabilities, it seemed like a really natural fit. And then kind of working with the content creating teams and the design teams and becoming aware of just the frustrations and the way that seeing how those processes had evolved over time. It was just about becoming familiar and then talking about it and sharing the knowledge of what the systems can do. So I don't know if that's a particularly unique kind of Slimming World / me use case, but it's about finding out what systems can do and then discussing them internally.
Okay, no, that's great. That's great, and I think you really explained how you moved towards the final system or today's system, not the final system.
Yeah, never final.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, with these things, it's often kind of never finished. In effect, you're always improving, always adapting. But it sounds very impressive at the moment. Did you? I mean, the second question: how do you measure the success of a transformation project like this? Did you have metrics at all? I mean, we can maybe talk to Phil after this and see if he's got any input on that. But did you actually have any ongoing, initial metrics for success, and how did you measure success?
Interestingly, I mean, I probably should have had some defined kind of KPI measures of success, but honestly, we didn't in the project. It was fairly obvious what the end result could be, and from our kind of internal discussions, eliminating the duplication of content and effort and reducing the amount of time that people are working on it. We've never measured it, but we know it's real. With the projects that we've been working on so far, it was really, really simple. We're working on something else very similarly, which is an integration between the design team and and another web CMS, which again is, for me, the measure of success is, can we remove a system? Can we simplify things? Can we get more processes into one place to make it easy for everyone to work with? That's my ultimate measure of success.
Great. No, and as I think you said something along the lines of, you were able to sort of repurpose a whole team who'd previously been fiddling, sort of transferring to changing formats and all of that. So that itself shows a big benefit. Just add up those salaries for a year and you probably get some pretty chunky figures already, not to mention all the other benefits. So that's great.
I should probably do that for my next annual review, shouldn't I?
Yeah, ask for a percentage.
Yeah.
Phil, have you got any experience of how other clients have looked at this side of things? I mean, obviously, when you do implement the system and it cuts out all this hassle, in effect, there's a massive obvious benefit there, but are there any metrics? Is there anything kind of formal you can do?
Yeah, formal metrics is not normally something we see, unfortunately. But I think the other area that can judge success is the way that James and Slimming World approach the project. He's looking for those quick wins at the start, building out what would an MVP, a minimal viable product, look like, which in Slimming World's case was a relatively straightforward dam that was implemented very, very quickly and got the system in front of users. It showed them value virtually immediately. So within a couple of weeks, people were active in the system, they were seeing the benefits of it. And it then enabled further conversations that James could have with the various departments to say, well, yeah, you've got this benefit already. These are the next ideas that I want to start looking at. And you get that buy-in much faster than everything being theoretical and saying, well, in 6 months or in 12 months, you're going to have this great, wonderful platform that will do this, that, and the other for you. It's breaking that down. And you know that if you hit those milestones as you go through, you're naturally getting that buy-in and you're naturally seeing success. Whereas it's quite a tough ask to get the business to commit to a much bigger project spend and get very little tangible benefit for quite some time.
So it sounds like classic good project management practice, project implementation, stages, and starting with a sort of proof of concept. And you've answered the next question, which is how do you pilot technology to demonstrate ROI? Well, that's how you do it. by the sounds of it, absolutely. So that's great. So James, I mean, any thoughts for the future of your content management at Slimming World? Have you hinted that you've got some other things on the go, other projects on the go? Have you got, what areas would you like to see invested in for the future? Is there anything that you would like urgently to extend that you haven't done so far?
No, I was going to say, I think our next big challenge is to, again, I'll use the word operationalize the kind of the review and the approval process, which hits a lot of people that are not necessarily kind of active users of the content engine, the DAM, the CMS. So at that point, you start to lose the benefits because things come outside of the system and the processes that you've done. So our next step is to look at that. And then internally within the organization, it's looking at what other CMSs, what other systems and people are using, and seeing what else we can bring, what else makes sense to be brought into that process. And I think, as I said at the start, it's not a one project thing. It's a program of small projects that build into a large one. So I'm always on the hunt for more.
Right. Yep. Fantastic. Fantastic. It's an interesting one here. Can technology play a part in generating content ideas? You mentioned that it's a content-first strategy at Slimming World. The Censhare system enables that. Is there any aspect of the system or your integrated solution that you have now that helps sort of boost staff creativity at all? Or does that all happen before you get to the whole kind of system? I suppose I'm sort of guessing what this person's asking, really, but thinking about that, maybe the ability to play with images, text, helping you to generate content ideas from previous ideas. Is there anything in that? It's a bit of a wild card, that one.
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't go as far as saying that the technology makes you more creative or helps you be more creative, but what it does do is it gives you the time to be more creative. And I know that there are constantly kind of pictures on similar things like AI and things like that, which can be integrated into systems as well, which might help in the future. From my point of view, they're not there yet. But for me, the biggest thing is about, say, making content visible, available, and easy to use, and making it so that the right people can make those decisions much more quickly. So you're not having a long kind of cycle of creation, review, and approval. It's create and done. Just cuts out the time and gives people that time back to then spend on research, commissioning, briefing, editing of the actual content itself.
Yeah,
maybe I'm being a bit too yeah.
Freeing up creatives to be creative.
Creative, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And I think maybe just time for one more, I think. What kind of mistakes do marketers or content creators tend to make when they're trying to streamline operations like this? Have you got any kind of watch out, be careful, words of warning for people moving down this road?
Mistakes.
Or just maybe being over ambitious. I mean, obviously one of those could be the big bang, which is always a trap. Let's challenge the business by doing something huge when actually we should be building up slowly. Is one classic.
I think for me the biggest mistake is not thinking about the process from end to end, from soup to nuts, because I think that there are always advantages to bringing together the processes in the closer you bring the processes into one system. So for example, your marketing campaign management and the assets that you need to create a particular campaign, kind of they should live within the same system that the actual assets are. So your planning documents, your timeline, your Gantt charts, if you can bring them into the same system that you're using to create those assets, it brings both the planning and the content processes together. And again, it removes time, it eliminates duplication. So for me, like the biggest mistake is not thinking end to end. So although I'm a big proponent of breaking things down into smaller bits, and as we have done, is kind of looking at a small proof of concept, looking at an image library first, and then bolting on additional functionality. The wider picture is, can I get everything into one process and into one system that everybody uses? Because when you get to that point, you truly start to realize the benefits, I think.
Absolutely. So have a global plan, but do it in stages. You're working towards it and just adding in, which you very clearly explained in your presentation. So that all makes perfect sense. So that's great. Well, sadly, that is all we have time for today. So we've had some real insight into how organizations can streamline systems and processes, create more content, and deliver better experiences for customers. It's been absolutely fascinating. So thanks again to James Naylor and Phil Arnold. And of course, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. So this webinar was brought to you by Bizibl Marketing in association with Censhare. This is just a final reminder that the on-demand recording will be sent to you within the next 24 hours, and you can request your free copy of the MarTech Buyer's Guide for Digital Asset Management in the exit survey as you leave. Thanks again for participating, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.